Hollywood icon Sylvester Stallone recently revealed in a heartbreaking discussion with his daughters that he came into the world unwanted, explaining that his mother told him repeatedly that she had tried to abort him. This was before 1973, obviously, when abortion was legal. And we'll see that here as we go down to the next one. My mother would say, the only reason you're here is because the hanger didn't work. Right? No legalized abortion. The hanger didn't work, or bouncing down those steps didn't cause you to get lost. He recalled pointing out some common abortion methods at that time in history. The thing I wanted to point out here is his mother told him repeatedly that she tried to abort him. Mm-hmm. And the only reason you're here is because the hanger didn't work. Abortion is not just the wiping away of some unrelated cells. You know, if his mother would have been successful in aborting him, he wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. His life wouldn't have happened. The Rocky movies wouldn't have been made. His daughters who are making this, documentary about him wouldn't be alive. So abortion is not this, oh, well, I'm just going to go get, a few unrelated cells. I was telling them today on campus that, again, the same thing. If your mother had aborted you, it's you who wouldn't be here. Not a bunch of unrelated cells, but you, the person with all your experiences, walking down the sidewalk, a college student, a professor, whatever you are, you wouldn't be here. So that's the thing about abortion. It's a real deception to say that, this is just a mass of unrelated cells, because it's not. It can't be. It's a person.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Willard Preacher Podcast. I'm Matt, and I'm joined once again by Gary Cattell, who is known as the Willard Preacher, an open-air evangelist on the campus of Penn State University. Gary, how are you doing?
Doing well, and you?
Doing fine, thank you. So the semester is, what, about two weeks old? Something like that?
Yeah, I guess, just starting to our third week today.
Okay, and how have things been going out on the steps of the Willard?
On the hallowed steps of Willard Building.
Yep.
It got fairly well, I guess. We've had some repeat customers, I guess you could say, can we put it that way? People that have come back a number of times. We've talked about, God in general, Orthodoxy versus Protestantism, just atheism, agnosticism. Today we had a guy who came by, and he had watched some atheist podcasts. He grew up Roman Catholic. He's not sure now. I think he's probably agnostic, but he was kind of arguing from these podcasts. And one of the things they were saying is, well, the scriptures have contradictions in them, so you can't trust the scriptures. And we've gone over that a little bit before, but it really doesn't matter if they do or they don't. I mean, we found one, I think, in how many times the rooster crowed or something before Jesus looked at Peter and Peter denied him 3 times or whatever. But it really doesn't matter, because any contradictions, first of all, when you have people who've had real life experiences, they're going to tend to come at it from different angles. They're not all going to say the exact same thing. If they did, it was probably contrived. Secondly, it doesn't matter. I was trying to tell him that yes, the scriptures are authoritative, but Jesus didn't say, the gates of hell won't prevail against the scriptures. He said the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. And it's not the scriptures that are the pillar and the ground of truth. It's the church that's the pillar and the ground of truth. So even if we lost all the scriptures, even if they got all, burned up and there wasn't a Bible around, the church would still have all her understandings because she had all her understandings before she wrote the scriptures.
Mhm.
So the church wrote the scriptures and put it together, decided that they were the scriptures. So the authorities in the church, and the scriptures are authoritative.
Mhm.
But if they have any contradictions in all, and most of the ones that I've seen are just one writer, let's say in the Gospels, adds more detail than another writer does.
Mhm.
But even if there were direct contradictions, it's never been anything about doctrine. And you wouldn't necessarily expect that wouldn't happen in some sort of, real life experiences. But again, it's the church that knows the truth. It's the church that is the truth. It's the church that's the body of Christ. And so I was trying to tell him, look, you're trying to go about this the wrong way. You're trying to find, who God is through reason. And of course, part of that was the scriptures and so on. And are they reliable? You don't find who God is through reason. You find who God is through revelation. And he has to get, and when we talk about revelation, I don't want to confuse people. We're not normally talking about a sense revelation, like you see something or you hear something, but because those are generally unreliable. Not always, but oftentimes unreliable. God can get into your heart. He can get into the core of your being, and he can reveal himself to you there. When he reveals himself to you there, you just know it. You don't know how you know it necessarily, but you know it. It's like the one guy who was an atheist, and he believed in God, and we're standing up on the steps of Willard, and I said, well, what do you believe right now? What do you know for sure without, you can't be wrong. He said, well, I know for sure that there's a God. I know it clearer than I know this building, which we were standing 2 feet from. And that's how God can do it. So he didn't really understand that. A lot of young people don't understand the idea of revelation because everything has always been about reason and logic.
Mhm.
But you can only take reason and logic so far. We've done podcasts where we debated an atheist, and we've done atheist podcasts. And yeah, you can give evidences for God's existence. And I think it's intuitive with most people that God exists. But who the God is, that's different. Even when you give evidences for God's existence, for me, before I was Christian, that wasn't enough. I needed God to reveal himself in some way. And he did. And again, he got inside my heart. I didn't even know what happened or didn't even feel anything or anything. I just knew it. Woke up one day and just knew that there was a God. Woke up one day and just knew that Jesus was God. A little bit more pronounced as to I had to follow him,
Mhm.
but and there was another an atheist out there last week, I think, the week before, and he's like, well, does that mean you have to believe that God exists before you seek after him? So no, but you have to believe that God might exist
Right.
and that he might want to make himself known to you.
Mhm.
As long as you believe those two things, you're okay. And then you can say, I remember myself, this was, eons ago. I remember thinking that, well, I may just be talking to the air right now, but God, if you're there, I want to know. And it took a while. I was trying to tell the guy today and I try to tell the students this, even when I'm preaching sometimes, that there's always going to be this conflict because they want to say, well, ask God and where was he? Or can I ask God tonight? And tonight I'll know. Or why is it that I've been seeking God for a long time and he hasn't made himself known to me? Because there's always this conflict between us wanting to be our own gods and God being God.
Mhm.
And normally, the norm is when we first start to seek after God, we we want to be our own God more than we want God. And so, since God loves us and respects our freedom, then He's not going to make Himself known to us as long as we want to be our own God more than we want Him. It's the seeking process that changes that equation. And as we seek every day, we get up and we say, God, I want to know. We have to be serious, we have to be fervent, we have to only want to know truth. Every time we do that, or as we do that over time, that equation changes, and slowly but surely, whereas we wanted to be our own God, and like in my case was up here, slowly but surely that changed. And as soon as it got up here, then God can say, okay, I can reveal himself to him now, and I'm not violating his freedom.
Mhm.
So we don't necessarily know when that time comes. And we're always going to see ourselves in the best light possible. So we say, oh yeah, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there. Well, we may not even be close to there. God knows when we're there. He knows the best time. Even when we get to that place where our desire for God is greater than our desire for our own God, still might not be the right time and place.
Mm-hmm.
When the right time and place comes, God will reveal himself because he wants us to know. He wants us to know him. That's why he created us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so we just have to keep it, and we just have to persevere.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's some of the things that we were talking about today. It was a long-ranging discussion. The guy's good. He's like, I think he's a sophomore now. He's good. He's a good thinker,
Right.
where many students aren't.
Uh-huh.
Many students can think well about their major,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to God and seeking God and finding God, they just don't have any knowledge to
Mm-hmm.
think from.
Mm-hmm.
But he had some, and so if it more comes back to me as time goes on, I'll let you know. But
Yeah.
it was kind of a wide-ranging discussion. It was an interesting discussion, and anyway, he was talking about a little bit about that everything is just predestined, or everything is just prearranged or preordained. I mean, God knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if he knows everything, then it couldn't have been different. So then we're trying to explain to him that God created space and time, so he's not subjected to it. So he sees past, present, and future by necessity. He sees past, present, and future as we see the present. He's outside of it. So yeah, he knows where we're gonna be and what we're gonna think throughout all our life, but not because he preordained it, but because he sees it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can still have freedom, and he can still know. Knowing's not the same as causing. So he can
Yeah.
still know when we still have freedom because he sees it all. And but if you're an atheist, you have to believe in kind of predestination, I guess, or causality or something, because if there's no God and everything is just material, well, the material works by cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
So from the Big Bang on, I think he finally understood this after a while, but from the Big Bang on, everything is kind of preordained in the sense that it can't be different.
Yeah.
Because of one cause and then the next effect and cause and effect and cause and effect, right down to us today and whatever we do, it can't be any different
Mm-hmm.
because it's just the material. But since the soul is not material, it's not subjected to that. So and the soul interpenetrates the body. So through the soul is where everything right from me is, because the soul leaves the body,
Mm-hmm.
it's still thinking, it's still choosing, it's still it is everything it is, and it's in the body to interact with the physical world, and it interpenetrates the brain and everything, but ultimately everything's in the soul.
Yeah.
So we're exempt from that. If we don't have an immaterial soul, we're not exempt from it because we're material as everything else is.
Mm-hmm.
If we have an immaterial soul, then we are exempt from it because we don't have that cause and effect necessity.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of problems with atheism when you get into that stuff because you don't have any free will. You can't love because love takes freedom.
Mm-hmm.
All these things we naturally do and act. We know we have freedom. We know we make choices. We know we can love. We know we can to do all these things. But if atheism is true, we're not really doing those things. It's just all an illusion.
Right.
But of course, if Christianity is true, it's not an illusion. It's real. And I think we all know that these things are real.
Yep. Yeah, that's such an interesting idea too, that like you said, atheism ends up being kind of locked into this material determinism, right?
Yeah.
We're just machines as part of a larger material machine that, like you said, it operates by cause and effect. You wonder even if that sort of outlook in terms of theology, right? There's Western Calvinism or something where they put that on God as well, that God, creates things and it couldn't be any other way. And he could have created it differently, but because he didn't, he knew, he basically caused everything. Um, what both the atheist and the Calvinist is, I guess, failing to recognize is that the spiritual world can be the cause of the effect in the physical world, if that makes sense, right? Like that. So for the atheist who thinks that we're just a machine and you can see all these molecules banging into each other and you could just rewind them and say, yeah, from that first collision, they all had to end in that final collision. Therefore, you're not really yourself. You're just a series of molecular interactions. We would say, no, we actually, because this, non-material soul, or, I guess created, but immaterial soul that we do have is causing a change. And we have that capacity to decide, or to move ourselves in a certain way. Therefore, they sort of have to come to grips with the fact that the universe isn't self-determined, because there's a whole layer of the whole spiritual realm and souls and angels and demons that are all kind of able to affect the world. Because they leave those important variables out, they therefore think it's all material, and therefore it is necessarily deterministic. And so if you're going to kind of lay that, the atheist, I guess, then sort of lay, at least as far as how you were, your conversation, he's sort of laying that on God. He has that assumption that it's all mechanistic and predetermined, and then he lays that on God. But he's failing to bring in the data that he doesn't have, which is that there's an entire spiritual world that is also intermixed, both within us personally and everywhere else.
Yeah, he's putting it all on God, saying everything is kind of predestined because of God. But really, everything's, quote, predestined in that sense if there is no God,
Mm-hmm.
not if there is one.
Right, exactly.
So another part of this, sort of, it goes along the same lines of God or no God, is just if there is no God, everything is just impersonal, in the sense that the universe doesn't mean anything. It's just an accident.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you'll see atheists, and they'll have this little picture of a galaxy or our galaxy, and they'll say, look, this little speck here is the Earth, and your little speck on the speck, and it's all meaningless and purposeless and whatever. And that's true if there's no God. Everything, it's just a cold, dark universe, or not dark, a cold universe. But from a Christian perspective, the universe is created by God out of love for us. And so that we can, sometimes the atheists will say, why would God waste all this space, so to speak, or make all this giant universe and everything? Well, that's so we can know a little bit about him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he created all that easily with just a word of his mouth, probably just a thought, actually. And it's easy for him to do that. So we look up at the sky and we see a tiny little bit of the universe. And we think it's so vast and everything, and it is. But God did that easily, but he did it out of love for us. It's not cold and impersonal and whatever. I mean, it may be in and of itself, but because God created out of love for us, it's not. And we're not just, the evolutionary byproduct of some, monkey-like creature long ago, just accidentally coming into existence, and life just accidentally coming into existence. This monkey-like creature long ago accidentally coming into existence, which we accidentally evolved from. It's all this kind of cold, meaningless, series of events. We'd say, no, God created everything out of love for us, and he created us out of love for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it all takes on much more warmth and much more meaning that way. So it's no wonder that young people today have all the mental illnesses they have, when they're not given anything to believe in,
Mm-hmm.
not given anything to make sense of anything. It's just all an accident. So oftentimes we as Christians, by the atheists, they'll say to us, well, you guys don't understand things, so you just say God did it. That's true, that's what we say. But they don't understand things, and they say stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's more likely to be true? Stuff happens, or someone creates?
Mm-hmm.
So as we said here before, beehives, birds' nests, spiders' webs, beaver dams, groundhog tunnels, none of this stuff just happens. It's all created by some manner of being. An anthill created, I don't know if ants think or whatever, but they create, obviously no reason, but they create, anthills. Anthills just don't happen. So nothing, forensic science works, and we take what we have seen, we apply it to what we didn't see. So if everything that we have seen that has order, complexity, and usefulness has been created by some manner of being, then the universe, which has much more order, complexity, and universe, has to be created by a being. What we don't see is things that we know where it came from, that isn't just nature, but we know where it came from. None of it just happens.
Mm-hmm.
We don't look up in the tree and see a bird's nest and say, well, we've seen birds do that, and we've seen things just happen and make that. But birds live in it now, so we don't know how that got there, but we know it's a bird's nest now. It's not how it works. So if all the simple things, simple structures need a creator, then the more complex structures need a creator. That's forensic science. When you don't see anything that we know where it came from, that is order, complexity, and usefulness just happening, then when you're saying the universe and all the life in it just happened, you're just pulling that out of the air.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have anything to back that up with at all.
Yeah.
But we believe it. And one of the things which I say to them is that, these scientists, their conclusions were mandated by their presupposition. As soon as they said you can't bring God into science, they're stuck with naturalism. Everything had to happen naturally. Once you're stuck with naturalism, you're stuck with some sort of Big Bang because you see the universe, coming into existence and expanding very quickly. So you have to have something along the orders of a Big Bang. You have to have abiogenesis, life from non-life, and you have to have evolution. People think that they came to these things as conclusions after looking at the evidence. No, it was mandated by their starting point that you can't bring God into science.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they see it through those tinted glasses, as we say oftentimes. And, they interpret the evidence through that tint in their glasses, just as we do. So the question is not who has the most evidence, as we say often, because, the universe is the evidence. It's who has the right tint to their glasses, right? So with this guy today, you can't reason to this stuff. You're putting the cart before the horse. You have to have a revelation of God. Then you'll know how everything got here. Then you'll know what everything means. You can't figure it out without that because it's all dependent upon that. It's dependent upon whether there's a God or not, and if so, who is he and what's he want from us? And not until you know that, yeah, you can think about things, you can philosophize, maybe it'll bring you to God, hopefully, but you're not going to be able to be certain about anything because you don't know the first step. You don't know your first belief is true, which is either there's a God or there isn't. If there is, who is he? Once you know that, then everything falls into place. If there is no God, there is no meaning to life. Everything's an accident. If there is a God, well, it depends on who he is. We say it's the God-man Jesus because it is. So once you know that, then you've got the church, ideally the Orthodox Church, and its scriptures and its worship and everything about it. And you've got lots of information with the saints and the fathers just given to you that you can then start to process and start to live off of and start to figure out how things work and where things came from and how to get a relationship with God and how to become into the image and likeness of God and so on and so on. So anyhow, all this is dependent upon your first belief. When people say, well, you can't bring God into science, well, why not? You take the scientific method, you look at the universe, all the life in it, and you simply come to the very reasonable conclusion it couldn't have happened on its own. Now, boom, you've got God. There's no other way to go, no place to go. So you can do it. It's just, it was the rebellion against Christianity back in the Enlightenment. At least that was part of the Enlightenment that's come through to today. And they don't want to bring God into it. They don't want to say, they want to be secular. They want to say there is no God or you can't know who God is, so that, again, they can be God over us. So anyhow, that's further than I thought this was going to go. But, that kind of all this stuff kind of comes together. And it's all kind of the same thing, even though there's different questions. It all comes back to the same thing. Is there a God or not? If so, who is he? Can we know who he is? And students say you can't know who God is. There's only one way that you can know you can't know who God is. And that's if God comes to you, reveals himself to you as God, so you know he's talking to you, and tells you he's not going to reveal himself to anybody. That's just foolishness. But how can you know God? So there's no mechanism. That's another thing I was trying to tell the guy today. There's no mechanism to know that there is no God or to know that you can't know who God is. There is a mechanism to know God, know that there is a God, and to know who he is. That's God can make himself known. So I said to him, what's your name? And he told me. I already knew it, but I was making a point. And he told me his name. Let's say, I won't give his name out here, to say it was Joe. And I said, well, how do I know that your name is Joe? And he said, because I told you. Okay, so you can tell me your name, but God can't tell me his name? Does that really make sense? If you can tell me your name, if you can tell me, where you live, if you can tell me all this information about yourself that I can't know through reasoning, why can't God, in some way, let us know all these things about himself that we can't know by reasoning. So I can't, I tried, this again, I know I'm going on and on here, but, I was trying to tell them, you can't sit at home in the morning. So look at anybody here you've never seen before. You could not have sat at home this morning and reason to that person's existence. Now that you see them, you can't reason to their name. You can't reason to what your professor is going to teach you. You can't reason to what's in your textbook. These things all have to be revealed to you. Much knowledge has to be revealed to you. Once you get enough information, then you can start to reason about it. The first step of our scientific method is observation, not reason. But you have to have something to reason about. You just can't start reasoning. Something has to be given or revealed or whatever. So these are some basics that once you kind of realize these things, then you can really seek for God, because then you're going to seek for, you can do the philosophizing and you can watch debates and you can read and you can do all this stuff and all that's good. But in the meantime, you have to be fervently asking God, show me, open up my eyes, get inside my heart and let me know for sure. And that deep place in my heart where I know that I know that I know, reveal yourself there so I can be sure there's no doubt. And I can then, progress into whatever the next step is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And certainly, when I encountered your ministry, that was the message that was earth-shattering to me in a good way. I had grown up sort of exposed to Protestant Christianity, and I really did, in the midst of that, just think that the way that it worked was you kind of blindly chose to believe about it.
Right.
And at a certain point, then you can also just blindly choose not to. And necessarily, why would you expect that you would still have that belief if you grew up in some other part of the world? But the idea of saying, look, Christianity says that God is a personal God, and that God can communicate. And so that's, if that is even a possibility, then that makes it, that makes it the means, that is the pathway for knowing, as you say, who God is. And so that was so helpful. And what you realize in sort of, once that pathway is kind of open to you, then and especially I would say within Holy Orthodoxy, that is just part of the presupposition of Christianity. Jesus everywhere is revealing himself to everyone that we see in the scriptures. And, that the Holy Spirit is guiding the church to all truth. And so the Holy Trinity is active in the life of the church and outside of the church, and, evangelizing the whole world. It's not, at no point is it simply said, hey, believe in these things because we told you to. It's that God has revealed himself to man. And like you said, everything we know about God, it's not because we reason to it. It's because this is what God has revealed to us.
Yeah, and that's I forget the exact context of it, but in every liturgy we sing God who has revealed himself to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of, like you said, what Orthodoxy is. And what you were talking about, most people think that definition of faith is blind hope. Like you were talking about, you just kind of you close your eyes, you throw a dart at a religious dartboard, and whatever it hits, that's what you're going to believe. Whatever you grew up with, that's what you're going to believe. And I hear that a lot, and that's pretty much secularism, right? They grew up with secularism, so they believe secularism.
Yeah.
Well, it was my parents' belief or my parents' religion. That's nice, but you're not a child anymore. You're an adult, so you can question. That you're, as we like to say, not going to be able to stand before God someday, the God-man Jesus someday, and say, "Well, Jesus, they told me I couldn't know who you were," because he's going to say, "Yes, they did. You're not a moron, or you weren't a moron. You could have challenged that belief if you wanted to. You chose not to, so you're accountable. You're not accountable for what the culture has placed into your head and into your heart or whatever. It does that as you're growing up, and you don't have any defense against that really at all, or even your parents or whatever. But you are accountable for looking at what you've been taught and challenging it and seeing if it's true. And everybody should be doing that. In fact, it's really the responsibility of every new generation. In fact, it's really responsibility primarily of the men of every new generation, but also the women, especially if the men abdicate like they are now. to challenge the ideas and beliefs and the morals of the culture and see if they're true or not. And so to every child growing up, maybe you get a revelation of God when you're young, and you may not have known you got it, but you just, it's in your heart, that you know that you know. But for most, they have to challenge that. They have to say, is this really real? Is this something that really happened to me? Is this really true? And if it is, it'll just strengthen that faith. If it isn't, then you got to find what the truth is, and which is difficult, which I think is why most most students that I preach to and talk to, they don't want that, because that's difficult. You got to kind of take your life and throw it up in the air and say, I don't know what's going to come down. And find the truth can take a long time. But what's better? Going through that hardship, taking a long time, maybe, finding the truth, believing a lie your whole life. Then getting to the end of your life and saying, whoops, I believed a lie my entire life.
Yeah.
What are you going to do then?
Well, and especially if you're, I feel fortunate that was something that I encountered as a 18, 19, 20-year-old. That's a good time to be seeking these things. Your life is not that well established. You're just becoming an adult, and you're figuring out a lot of things. That is a great time to be seeking that sort of truth, and therefore ordering your life in the right way. It doesn't get any easier when you're in your 40s and you have a family and a career or whatever. But it can be done in that case as well. But if you're a young person, take advantage of the energy and opportunity of youth.
Yeah, it's better to do it when you're young. But if you're older, like I am, it's still never too late, right?
Yeah.
It's never well, unless you've hardened your heart to the place where you don't want to do it anymore. Just did a short about that. People would say, well, it's possible to. People say, well, on my deathbed, I'll just have fun, I'll enjoy myself, and on my deathbed, I'll repent. Well, you might not have a deathbed, number one. And number two, every day you live your life in sin and unrepentance is another day you're hardening your heart. It's, darkening your conscience. So you could get to the end of your life and it's just like, you just don't have any desire. You don't have any will. Your heart is so hardened. Your conscience is so darkened. You just don't want to. Now, if you want to, you can. That shows your heart isn't too hardened. Conscience isn't too darkened. But a lot of people, I've seen a lot of testimonies. I was just reading one in a book called St. Andrew the Fool for Christ. We had this friend who he thought was a deacon, and he thought he was, a good person, a holy person, but he wasn't. He had a lot of secret sins. He got to the end of his life, and the demons were just playing around with him, and he couldn't understand it. So he asked St. Andrew, the Fool for Christ, and he said, yeah, he had all these secret sins, and he had hardened his heart so much and darkened his conscience so much that, he just didn't have the will. He couldn't do it. He was the plaything of the demons. So you don't want to get to that point. But if you have any desire at all to find God, any desire at all to repent, then you haven't gotten to that point yet. So today is the day of salvation.
That's right. Okay. Any other interactions out at Willard?
I think that, unless I think of something as we go on.
Okay.
66-year-old mind sometimes loses it, but.
Should we, well then, so the topic that we wanted to talk about in this, you had come across an article about Sylvester Stallone. So we'll pull up some of the pertinent pieces of that. But I guess the Sylvester Stallone, he was probably a bit more of a big deal maybe when I was young or when you were young. He wrote and starred in and I guess directed maybe Rocky and was a huge movie star. And I guess he still is, still making movies and so on. But that's sort of, incredibly successful in a worldly sense. But this is what we wanted to talk about. So let me share that. Let's see here. There we go.
And probably most even younger people have heard of the Rocky movies.
Yeah, for sure.
And some of the other movies that he did, action movies that he did.
Yeah, Rambo.
And this one,
Expendables, more recently, I guess.
So this one, as you can see by the title here, we're going to talk a little bit about abortion. But he had a tough childhood. Anybody who can go through what he did, and still turn out like he did, even if you had some bobbles along the way. I respect that. The harder you have it, if you can overcome it, sometimes the stronger you are, rather than somebody who had it easy all their life. Hollywood. So we have the link. I guess you're going to put up. You want to read this whole thing? We're just going to kind of read some of the things that I highlighted. We'll do this one, and the next one we'll kind of put them together.
Okay.
Hollywood icon Sylvester Stallone recently revealed in a heartbreaking discussion with his daughters that he came into the world unwanted, explaining that his mother told him repeatedly that she had tried to abort him. This was before 1973, obviously, when abortion was legal. And we'll see that here as we go down to the next one. My mother would say the only reason you're here is because the hanger didn't work. Right? No legalized abortion. The hanger didn't work, or bouncing down those steps didn't cause you to get lost. He recalled pointing out some common abortion methods at that time in history. The thing I wanted to point out here is his mother told him repeatedly that she tried to abort him. And the only reason you're here is because the hanger didn't work. Abortion is not just the wiping away of some unrelated cells. If his mother would have been successful in aborting him, he wouldn't be here. His life wouldn't have happened. The Rocky movies wouldn't have been made. His daughters who are making this, documentary about him wouldn't be alive. So abortion is not this, oh, well, I'm just going to go get, a few unrelated cells. I was telling them today on campus that, again, the same thing. If your mother had aborted you, it's you who wouldn't be here. Not a bunch of unrelated cells, but you, the person with all your experiences, walking down the sidewalk, a college student, a professor, whatever you are, you wouldn't be here. So that's the thing about abortion. It's a real deception to say that, this is just a mass of unrelated cells, because it's not. It can't be. It's a person. So I don't know if we want to get into some of the abortion stuff now. We want to wait a little bit, but we'll just do one thing right now because it kind of goes along with this. But the classic pro-choice argument is a woman has the right to do anything with her body that she pleases. Well, that's just, I don't know if it's a lie these days or just false or people bought into it, but it doesn't work any way you look at it. The baby has a different DNA makeup than the mother does. So it's impossible for the baby to be the mother's body. And that's the whole thing here. Besides the legal aspect of it, the baby is her body and she can do with her body what she wants. But the baby can't be her body because it has a different DNA makeup. It may even be a different sex. It could be a male. There's no way. This is just like, I don't know what it is now. For us, it was 6th grade, sex ed or whatever. This is not difficult to figure out. But also, it's not even true that a woman can do anything. It's legal for a woman to do anything with her body that she wants, right? It's not legal, at least in most places in America, to shoot up heroin, take fentanyl. It's not legal to engage in prostitution in most places. It's not legal to sell your body parts on eBay. It's not legal in many places to commit suicide, isn't that the ultimate in doing with your body what you want, deciding whether it lives or dies? So it's not even legal to do anything you want to with your own body. So the baby's not the mother's body. It's not legal to do anything you want to with your own body. And yet this, the pro-choice movement keeps persisting, and they do it because it works for them. They keep putting out this falsehood, this lie, this misunderstanding, whatever it is. And people keep buying it. I hear this all the time. Oh, well, a woman can do it, but still now, this is how many years later, since 1973, all these years later, and it's still being used and it's still working and people are still buying it, people are still saying it. But unless you can show that a baby with a different DNA makeup than the mother is the mother's body, and where was it a year ago? I mean, it wasn't, you can't, there's no way to show this is the mother's body unless you can show that it's legal to do anything you want to with your own body. This argument makes no sense. It's out there. It's one of the most used and unfortunately one of the more powerful ones, arguments out there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on. We'll come back to more of the abortion thing because we can get through the article, and then there's a lot more on abortion that we can do. There's some things down here that are, unless you want to do the abortion things first and then go down to this part.
It's up to you. However you'd like to do that.
We might as well let's go up. We'll just do the abortion things first because this down here I think is a little bit different.
Okay.
So here's the pro-choice. I've got some things written down here because I don't, I don't get into these discussions much anymore because, there's a secular culture and they don't feel the need to. They don't know these arguments because they've just grown up with this stuff. But the basic pro-choice argument is you have to develop to a certain point before they will call you a human being and make it illegal to kill you. Now, first of all, what gives them the right to do that? Why do they get the right to say who's human and who isn't? And don't we have enough experience with that? Right? I mean, that's what we did with the Native Americans, right? The American Indians. Well, they're more savage than humans, so we can just take their land and do what we want. The Black Africans, well, we can enslave them and we can segregate them because they're less human than we are. Hitler did essentially the same thing with the Jews, holding back the evolution of man. There's something wrong with them. They're less than the rest of us. If you look back in history, every single time a government has chosen some portion of their population and declared them to be less human than the rest, they've always been wrong. You give enough time and you look back on it, they are always wrong. They've never been right. So what makes us think that the first time in history we're going to be right? It's impossible. It's never going to happen. So, but you take that belief and you say, okay, basically what they're saying is this is less developed than this, so this is less human than this. Well, you do that, and I think I can make a pretty good case that newborns aren't really fully human. All I have to do is say newborn can't walk or talk or reason on a level higher than an animal. So obviously it's less human than we are because we can walk and talk and reason on a level higher than an animal. So the newborn must not be fully human. I've taken an earlier level of development, compared it to a later level of development, and said, since this is less than that, then this can't be fully human. And I can do the same thing with college students. I can say, well, the scientists tell us that your brain's not fully developed till you're 25. Most college students aren't 25. So obviously, they're less human than those of us who are over 25 because they're less developed. You could say that, well, if you're 25, though, in 25 years, when you're 50, you'll be a very different person. Emotionally, mentally, physically, you'll be a different person. So maybe you're not really fully human until you're 50. If you're 50, maybe you're not fully human until you're 75 because you'll be a much different person then, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Or maybe you're becoming human when you're 50. You're human when you're 50, and after that, you start to devolve. There's no end point to this because we're always changing. We either going forward or backwards, but we're always changing. So as soon as you say that you have to develop to a certain point before you're fully human, where's the end point of that? Where does that end? Another point in this is, if we were really a civilized country and we couldn't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're not killing babies in abortion, then shouldn't we put a moratorium on abortion until we are sure? Why are we saying we can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're not killing human beings, we're not killing babies, but we're going to keep going just in case we're not? And they could say, well, you can't prove that we are killing human beings. Well, I think we give pretty good evidence. Okay, maybe we can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. What's the downside? Okay, a woman has to carry a baby to term. All right, that's a lot less of a negative than killing the baby. So we sometimes the people that cry loudest about past injustices are the ones that are most unjust today. So they say, oh, what happened during slavery and segregation still affects things today. What happened to American Indians still affects things today. What happens to the Jews still affects things. Well, maybe it does. But, you're doing the exact same thing. You're using they don't like to hear it, but you're using the exact same philosophy that was used to, what we did to segregate the American Indians and put them on reservations, and enslave and segregate the blacks and kill the Jews and so on. You're using the exact same philosophy. These are less human than those. So you're complaining about what happened to your ancestors or somebody's ancestors. and yet you're doing the same thing. So here is, and we've done this before, but we'll do it again here. Here's the best evidence I think I can give, besides the fact that, sometimes the simple ones are the best ones. If your mother would have aborted you, you wouldn't be here now. Sometimes that has a greater effect than some other things do. But when you ask a pro-choicer, what's a woman pregnant with? Generally, they're going to say a fetus, generally. But they might say an embryo, a zygote, a fertilized egg. You can go all the way back to a fertilized egg. All right, what's a woman pregnant with? A fertilized egg. All of these are stages of development within mammals. All mammals go through the same stages of development. So what's she pregnant with? Fertilized egg, zygote, embryo, fetus. These are all stages of development within mammals. So as soon as you say she's pregnant with a fertilized egg, a fetus, or whatever, you're saying she's pregnant with a mammal. Now, what sort of mammal do we suspect she might be pregnant with? Probably not a goat, right? I mean, on college campus, maybe you're not totally sure. Probably not a goat. If she's pregnant with a mammal, it has to be a human mammal she's pregnant with. And if it's human, it has to be a person, because humans are persons. Now, it may not be foolproof, I don't know, but it should give us pause to say, well, maybe we should put a little moratorium on abortion. The only thing that's not absolute is there's a person yet, but that's because people say, well, personhood is in the brain. That's only for only physical beings. But if we're soul, personhood's in the soul. It's there right from the beginning. And we believe, as Christians, we believe that Jesus was fully God and fully man, fully human and fully God at the point of conception. And I think we brought in some, was it last week we brought in some scriptures? We were doing Secular Society as the Antichrist, about, Jesus calling some prophets from the womb. And I named you from the womb, or whatever it said, or even before the womb, I knew you. So, even if you don't think it's foolproof, are we so sure that we're not killing human beings that we want to continue with this? And remember, we're all going to have to give an account, not just, I wouldn't want to stand before the God-man Jesus, who always, talked about the least of these and caring for the least of these, and try to explain why I either was for abortion. I was trying to tell them today, look, the North during slavery was pro-choice, right? They said, we wouldn't do that here. We're not going to tell you not to do that there. Do we give them a pass because they didn't do it? No, we said you should have said something. You should have stood up. You should have fought against it long before you did. So, I would not want to stand before the God-man Jesus and try to defend, how I was for abortion. But if you have done it, and I had to repent of that ultimately, and Jesus forgives it, but still, it's still there. And if you don't repent of it, it'll be there, and you will have to give an account for it. But even short of that, eventually, at some point, I imagine some generation is going to come along that says, look, this is ridiculous. We can't justify this anymore. So when that happens, then they're going to look back on every generation from 1973 on, and they're going to condemn everybody that was for abortion. If you're pro-choice, you're for abortion, right? And they're going to condemn all those people because they said, these were babies. You had the science. At least eventually you had the science. I don't know about 1973. I'm sure we did. But at some point you had the science early on. You knew that this was a baby. You knew how this was forming. You knew that it had all its body parts by the time it was aborted, or you could have known that. So you're responsible to have done something. If you didn't do anything, then you're going to be condemned. Not just by God, which is bad, which is the worst, but by your fellow man ultimately. So let's see if we got anything else here. I think that's probably, when people say, I'm personally against abortion, but I don't think it should be illegal. Well, there's only one reason to be personally against it, and that's you believe it's killing a baby. So how can you say, yes, I believe abortion is killing a baby, but I think it should be legal to kill a baby? Right? They don't put it that way. They say, I'm against abortion myself, but I'm not going to tell a woman what to do with her body, whatever dumb thing it is. I don't want to make it illegal or whatever. But if you know that it's a baby and you know it's being killed, you have to be against it. You have to want to make it illegal because you have to want to protect the least of these. And sometimes one of the, I wonder if I can remember this as I go on, but some of the times what I used to say is, what if, oh, this is, sometimes I'll say, well, what if the mother's life is in danger? Then shouldn't she be able to have the abortion? Well, look, first of all, if I'm given a choice by pro-choicers, I'm representing the pro-lifers, and the pro-choicers said, make all abortion illegal except for rape and the life of the mother. And incest is the same as rape. Rape and the life of the mother. I'd take that, not because I believe having abortion in the life of the mother or rape is good, but because it would do away with 98% of the abortions. But whether it's moral or not is another question. So, in Christianity, at least, and in most of American history, which from some sort of Protestant Christian belief system, the bigger, the stronger, the one who's lived longer, it should protect the weaker and the younger and the one who's lived less. So the mother is to protect her baby. She's not to sacrifice her baby for her own life. And one of the example I used to give to this is back in the day, they used to talk about going postal, because there were some times when gunmen would go into post offices and shoot the place up for whatever reason and kill people. So I said, what if you have a mother in the post office? She's just gone there to mail a package. She got a newborn baby in her arms, and this guy starts shooting. In this scenario, you got two choices. You can lift the baby up as a human shield, let the baby take the bullet for you, and die, most likely, we'll just say die, or and so the mother can go home to her husband and her other children, still be a wife to her husband and mother to her other children, or she covers up the baby, takes the bullet herself, and dies herself. What should she do? Well, obviously, from a Christian point of view, I've had atheists say she should sacrifice the baby, and that just shows atheism. Not all atheists would say that, but that's not wrong in atheism. But in Christianity, it would be wrong. She should protect her baby at all costs and trust that God will take care of things at home. But imagine going home and saying, okay, kids, your mother had a tough day today, but she came home alive because she sacrificed your baby brother. And then nobody would ever say that, but that's exactly what happened. So, but they say the same thing about rape. What about rape? You can't expect this woman to carry this child to term. And everyone's going, well, how this happen? And all this stuff, and why are you pregnant, and going to be tough to do, and you have this rapist child in your body. But in my view, the rapist or the baby didn't do anything wrong. If you're going to kill somebody, if you're going to execute somebody for a crime, then that person had to actually do the crime. So if you have bloodlust because of rape, which, to tell you the truth, I don't mind capital punishment for rape. But if you have bloodlust for rape, or if you want capital punishment for rape, then kill the rapist. He's guilty. What has the baby done? What has the baby done to deserve to be killed? Well, A attacks B, so B kills C. Why does that make sense to anybody? Now, I understand that's going to be really tough for her, and people think they're being compassionate by saying, let her abort the child. But the rape wasn't her fault. And with enough counseling and enough time, she can learn to deal with that. I'm not saying get over it in a trite sense, but but with the help of Christ, she can overcome that, and she can live a good life because she wasn't at fault. But once she aborts the baby, she's at fault. You're just adding huge insult to injury. Yeah, she's been injured through the rape, but now she's killed her baby. And what happens? What happens when she gets pregnant and wants the baby? And she realized at that very same time, and this is for people not just rape, but anybody who's had an abortion, you have an abortion in college or whatever, and you killed the baby at 2-3 months along, and you then get pregnant when you're married, and you get pregnant, and you're like, wow, honey, we're going to have a baby. Then you realize, oh, at this point in time in my youth, I killed my child, I had an abortion. But now I believe it's a human. This is the weird thing about this is the idiotic thing about America. When that baby becomes human, when the mother wants it,
Mhm.
If the mother doesn't want the baby, she can go into that abortion clinic and she hasn't killed anything. Same amount of weeks pregnant, the mother wants the baby. She's now all of a sudden changing her eating habits, changing her, if she was drinking alcohol, she's no longer drinking alcohol. Why? Because she's taking care of the baby in her womb.
Mhm.
So if she wants it, it's a baby. If she doesn't want it, it's not a baby. This is just absurd. Lions get pregnant with lions, whales get pregnant with whales, dolphins get pregnant with dolphins, humans get pregnant with humans. It's just common sense, but we don't want common sense because what this has always been about and always will be about, at least in America, maybe in China, it's about birth control. Here, it's about not birth control, population control. Here, it's about sex without consequences. That's what it's always been about in America. 1973, secular revolution. At the height, part of that was the sexual revolution. It's at its height in 1973. And all of a sudden, Supreme Court illegally, in my opinion, and I guess in the new Supreme Court's opinion, makes abortion legal, forces abortion in all 50 states. Why? Because men could walk away if they got a woman pregnant, there was no DNA testing. Women couldn't walk away. Now, through abortion, they can walk away. But then they know much more than the man does that they killed a baby. They can harden their heart and push it out of their mind. They knew that there was a life in there.
Mhm.
And again, if this is you, or if you're the man and you did this, then you have to go to the God-man Jesus and he'll forgive you. But that doesn't mean you can go out and continue to sin. To dedicate your life to him, you have to follow him the rest of your life. And he's good enough and merciful enough and gracious enough to forgive you all your sin, including killing of a baby.
Mhm.
All right, finally, I think this is a final one. Let me go through this. We're sure. I think that's it. This is the final one. A lot of times in my career at Penn State, a woman would approach us, woman would come up and say, you don't have the right to talk about abortion, right? You're not a woman. You can't get pregnant. Now, this is different. I don't know if they say now. You identify with a woman, you can get pregnant, menstruate, whatever. But in reality, you're not a woman. You can't get pregnant. And my response was, yeah, you're right. I'm not a woman. I can't get pregnant. But as a former fetus, I am definitely against abortion. I'm essentially going back to my old neighborhood. I'm trying to protect as many of my fellow fetuses as I can, because just as I was a fetus, my mom didn't abort me. If she would have, it would have been me. So we're going to try to go back and say, well, I used to be a fetus. Look at these fetuses here. Let's do our best to try to save one or two if we can.
Mhm.
All right, I think that's all I got.
Okay. Yeah. And, I really, I like what you were saying in terms of, yeah, a man can walk away, but a woman, there was that sort of inequality that she couldn't just walk away from the consequences of whatever their conception. Um, but now we say, oh yeah, now the woman is free to exercise her right or whatever. And of course, that's just a huge lie, because it's the woman who has to deal, like you said, with the very real trauma that abortion invariably inflicts on the woman. It's killing the child, but it's also destroying the woman usually. And that's one of those things that's kind of not emphasized nearly enough, is that it is a traumatic event for anyone who goes through that. um, and it really feels to me like, in the same way that so many of the things about feminism are really about destroying the family and are really not about helping women at all, but it in the same way that, like, having women and more and more women working, for example, just means that more women can be taxed, and that uh, makes it harder to have a take care of your children, and it means the schools are raising your children more, and all those kinds of things. This is another example of, yeah, supposedly we're helping women, but really what we're doing is we're damaging them, and that's not going to have a good effect on them. It's not going to have a good effect on their families going forward. So all of these things are just, these are disruptors for a healthy life that, you know someone can dwell with God and have a stable life with. So it's yeah, it all the rhetoric around abortion really ends up being just completely the opposite of reality. It's totally damaging. It's not. It's killing a human being. It's damaging the woman. So it's just awful from top to bottom.
Yeah, we had the choice back then, and the women are saying, look, we can't walk away from this. The men can. So we have the choice. We could have said nobody walks away,
Yeah.
right? You point the man out, and if we can some way figure out that he's the man, then we'll hold him accountable. If we can't, we'll some way help you with the baby, but we decided that everybody walks away. And a lot of times feminists would say, well, men can't talk about abortion, but men, because men are going to be against abortion for whatever reason, but men love abortion, right? Because all they got to do is fork out a few $100s, and the problem's gone. But the woman, the problem isn't gone. Because I don't know about most guys. Maybe I'm not like most guys. I don't know. That baby in my wife's womb didn't really become real to me till I saw it. I know it's there. Technically, her belly's getting bigger. You can kind of feel things moving in there, but she's the one that has it in her. She knows that that's real. She knows she's got a being in there. It's real to her. She's bonding with that baby even in the womb. And maybe there's some super sensitive guy out there that can do that beforehand, but that wasn't me. When that baby came out of the womb, then that was real, right? So, anyhow, nobody should be able to walk away, right? And now, especially now, even if you could say back then, okay, well, the man can walk away, so we're trying to make it equal to the woman. I don't believe that, but that doesn't hold true anymore, because you have DNA testing, and you can test that DNA, and you can know that who the guy is. So this is all part of secularism, right? Trying to get as far away from Christianity as possible. And there was a book put out many years ago that's the kind of the handbook of the left. I can't remember what it's called offhand, but there was a part in there that he said something along these lines. The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. So they'll take these issues or these crises that come up or whatever, and they'll make a big deal out of them. You think the focus is on them, but it's never that. It's always the revolution. It's in that case, it's always kind of socialist utopia, the anti-Christ socialist utopia that they're trying to get to. And as we said before, as many beliefs that they can put between us and the God-man Jesus, they're going to do. They'll use any excuse possible. I mean, once you get focused on the issue and just kind of focus on that, and yes, the issue is important, you have to focus on, but it's part of a broader issue. It's part of the socialist utopia that's always a disaster, always totalitarian, always anti-Christ, always anti-Christian. So as Christians, we have to understand this is all part of the bigger picture to make an anti-Christian socialist society. If you don't know that Marxist society, I guess, is going to be anti-Christian, just look at anywhere it's been tried. Christians have died by, 100 million people died under communism. Most of those were Christian. So this is all just part of it.
Now,
anyhow,
is there anything more with regards to Sylvester Stallone? You have this, some of this.
Yeah, we do have some things at the end here that I thought
bolded.
might be interesting.
Okay. Is there anything that isn't bolded that we want to make mention of?
Well, if you want to humanize his mother a little bit, we can go down here.
Okay.
So where it says, when his daughters express shock.
Okay.
Next page. At the terrible things his mother said to him. He tried to give her some grace by explaining that she had grown up in a horrifically abusive situation. Her mother was a troubled person. She was put into an orphanage, in a very cruel orphanage, because her father had remarried and her new stepmother hated her, he explained. And I think my mother was also kind of rebellious. So she was put into an orphanage that, it's unlike the ones they have today. It was, you're tied to the bed, you're whipped, she was terribly molested. I think whatever ability, and I think her ability to ever show love was short-circuited. She literally couldn't stand to be touched or touch at all. I mean, not even give a hug. And then he explained that he spent the first 4 to 5 years of his life in a transient boarding house feeling disconnected and unloved. So you can kind of understand. In the end, I think God takes all this stuff into account. But you've got to find a way to kind of deal with these things. It's understandable the way she was what she was, but it doesn't necessarily justify what she did.
Yeah.
All right, let's go down to some of this other stuff that we'll do real quick here. And like I said, we're going to have the link to this article if you want to read it all yourself. We'll have it on the podcast. He also told, where'd it go? Here we go. He also told CBN that after gaining success and fame in Hollywood, his ego, deep soul wounds, and worldly temptations took over in his life, and he went spiraling out of control. But God would always bring him back around and give him another chance. Again, we always try to say the rich and famous don't necessarily have it good. Because you see this almost every single time in somebody who's a rock star or a movie star or somehow rich and famous. There's so many temptations, so many things they can do with their money that seems that they're pleasurable and seem so good, and people are seeming to have so much fun. And you get into it, and this is my experience too. I wasn't rich and famous, but I got into the kind of party lifestyle, definitely the party lifestyle. And it always looks good, looks fun. And when you first get into it, it is fun. That's the deception of it. And it stays fun for a while. The more you get into it, slowly but surely, it starts to wear on you, starts to tear you down. And ultimately, it will destroy you if you don't get out of it. And you see this cycle in a lot of rock stars, movie stars, wherever they get into this, they're partying. If they're a rock star, they're playing these big concerts, they're having the time of their life. And all of a sudden, down the road, you see they're in rehab because it gets to you. It's not what it seems. That pleasure is the devil's way of sucking you in so he can destroy you. So one of the things we believed in the 60s and 70s, for me, the 70s, was if it feels good, do it. Right? But, and it seems to make sense to the secular mind, to the fleshly mind or whatever. But that's how the devil destroys us. He's not going to destroy us by saying, here, let me look mean and evil to you. Let me look horrible to you, and I'll suck you in. He's always going to look beautiful. He's always going to look pleasurable. He's always going to seem like this has to be good. This is so much fun, but it's self-destructive and it destroys you. And I was asked, last week, I think it must have been last week because it wasn't today, a couple of times by people doing these little things online, I guess. I had any advice to freshmen. And basically I said, yeah, don't get drunk and laid, don't get drunk and fornicate. It's going to destroy you. You'll regret it in the end, right? It always seems so good. People come into college and they think, yeah, I'm going to get into party life. I've heard all about it. All my friends have told me all about it. And maybe you could get into it a little bit. You'd still go to hell, unfortunately, but maybe you can get into it a little bit. It's not going to destroy you. But the more you get into it, the more it tears you down. And my feeling at the time was, because I was an idiot, was if a little is fun, more will be more fun. But it never works out that way. A little is fun, more is destructive. So I really decided to take things out of my own hands and put it in God's hands, because I always felt I was chosen to do something, he said. Yes, you were chosen to do something. You were chosen for salvation. I always hear this. Somebody was in an accident or just escaped death by the skin of their teeth or whatever. And then God did that because he has something for me to do. Yeah, you weren't ready for eternity yet. You still have stuff to do. You still need to become more godlike. Maybe he's got something for you to do that's nobody else could do. I don't know. I doubt that. He spares us for our own salvation most of the time, 99.99%. Can't say for everything because I'm not God, but that's, salvation is not getting to heaven. It's becoming godlike and being able to take your place in heaven, shining brighter than you would have if you'd have gone in to begin with, or maybe you'd have gone to hell to begin with. And maybe you've got some time now. So yeah, God has chosen you to do something. He's chosen you for salvation like he's chosen everybody in the world for salvation. He's spared you because you still have more of your salvation he wants you to accomplish. Now, I can't say that God doesn't have something else for him to do, but that's what he has for all of us to do. And, we just get our ego gets in the way. Oh, God's something great for me to do. Now, he needs you to repent. Leave more of your sin, get deeper into your heart, clean up your heart more by the grace of God, so you can shine brighter in the kingdom of God. He's given you a chance. Don't blow it. All right. Next is, I think, the saint of the day. I don't know, we've been going for a while now. We'll try to go through this somewhat quickly if we need to. Venerable female martyr Parasceva. I think that's how you pronounce it. All right. Parasceva was born in Rome of Christian parents, and from her youth was instructed in the faith of Christ. With great fervor, Saint Parasceva endeavored to fulfill all the commandments of God in her life. Generally speaking, that's what we're lacking in modern life. Great fervor. We've got it easy. We at least in America, in much of the West and much of the world, we got it easy. We want comfort and ease. It's very difficult for us to, with fervor, repent of our sin, look into our heart, seek to get rid of as much sin as possible, seek to be godlike with as much fervor as possible. That's very difficult for us to do. Probably more difficult than it was for them. But that's what's necessary. That's what she did. And of course, here we are talking about her. Endeavoring to fulfill all the commandments of God in her life, believing firmly and living according to her faith. Again, believing firmly and living according to her faith. You can't just believe. I think on campus, most students would say they believe in some sort of God, a higher power, which is meaningless, doesn't mean anything. Who is that higher power? What's he want from you? It's just a meaningless belief. Belief is not that. The first step to actually believing is to know who you're believing in. Because otherwise, if you don't know who the God is, you don't know who you're believing in. You don't know what they want from you. You don't know anything. You're just believing this thing out there that's meaningless. Then you have to know what they want from you. Then you have to go and do it. That's believing. Knowing who it is, knowing what they want from you, and going and doing. Then you can say you believe. Before that, you're just giving an intellectual assent that God exists, which is what happens mostly today. Believing firmly and living according to her faith, Parasceva directed others on the path of salvation and the pious life. When her parents died, Parasceva distributed all of her property to the poor and was tonsured a nun. Again, that happened a lot in those early centuries. And even afterwards, but it happened a lot in those early centuries. People gave up everything. They just said, okay, we've got this, I've got this great inheritance here. Well, I'm just going to give it to the poor because I want to be saved. And I don't want this getting in the way, because riches, as we said earlier, can get in the way, because ultimately Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, which is true Christianity, is an ascetical religion. Jesus said you have to die to yourself. You have to go to the cross. You have to deny yourself. It's not impossible to do that with great riches, but it's much more difficult because you have much more temptation. As a nun, she preached the Christian faith with even greater zeal. This is the thing that I love about the early martyrs. Not hiding from anyone, even though at that time the Roman authorities were conducting a bloody persecution against the Christian faith. Right? She didn't hide. She didn't say, oh, well, it wouldn't be wise for me to go out and preach when they're killing my fellow Christians. She just said, and it's like they had this faith that said, this is a great honor. Why should I hide when my Lord didn't hide and they crucified him? Why should I hide? Well, some saints did hide for a while, so because they knew that their people that under them that they were ministering to needed them, but eventually they did come out and they did go to their death and were tortured, and they saw it as a great honor. And I just don't. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Then the pernicious Jews denounced Saint Parasceva. Obviously, this isn't all Jews when they say pernicious. They're talking about the ones that would denounce the Christians. Saint Parasceva for preaching a forbidden faith, denounced her for preaching a forbidden faith. She's brought to trial before Emperor Antoninus. All the flatteries of the emperor did not shake the faith of his handmaiden of God. That's what they always tried first, right? They always tried the flatteries. We'll give you great riches. I'll make you my right-hand man or whatever. I'll give you all this. You'll be honored in the kingdom. And that's very enticing to us humans. And we want that. We want that appeals to our ego. And I'm sure that convinced some of the early Christians who didn't make it to martyrdom, who denied their faith. Then they subjected her to torture by fire and placed a red-hot helmet on her head. The Lord miraculously saved her, and Parasceva was freed and left Rome. She continued to travel from city to city to convert pagans to the true faith. Again, this always amazes me because I could just imagine us today, myself included, thinking, wow, I just went through this. They tortured me with fire. They put this red hat helmet on my head. You know, I've got PTSD. I just need to recover for a while.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't do that. She just went, she said, okay, it's time to preach again. I'm free. I'm going to preach again. And again, I would love to have that sort of faith and that sort of zeal. She was, I remember Saint Sylvester we talked about, where they shot him through with arrows,
Mm-hmm.
and they left him for dead. And this Christian lady came and nursed him back to health. And what did he do? He went back to the authorities and said, well, here I am. I'm here. You know, you screwed up. You know, I'm giving you a second chance. I just don't think, I don't know if I would do that today. I don't know how many people would do that today. We'd probably say, well, let this just, you know, lay low now. You know, I don't want to go through that again. But he did. And, you know, she was brought before princes and judges in 2 more cities and was tortured for her Lord, tortured again, at which time she worked great miracles. By the power of God, quickly recovered from her pains and wounds. You know, a lot of the pagans, I'm getting the understanding that reading these martyrs, a lot of the pagans were converted because of how the Christians took torture and their patience in it, and they're not whining and crying, they're not begging for their life. They're being patient, they're taking it. A lot of pagans were like, this is supernatural. Nobody can go through this. You know, they tell you today, everybody gives in to torture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, eventually you're going to give in. But with the grace of God, you don't have to. You know, these great martyrs didn't, because they had the grace of God. The pagans, as always, ascribed her miracles to magic and her swift recoveries to the mercy of their gods. Because you would think, well, they do all these miracles and they're like beaten to a pulp and there's broken bones and they're just thrown into prison and the next day they come out fully healed. You would think, you know, these authorities would say, oh, well, maybe there's something going on here. But, you know, they just think it's magic or their own gods or whatever, or the opposing gods or whatever. St. Parasceva once said to the prince who was torturing her, oh, prince, it's not your gods who have healed me, but my Christ, the true God. Finally, a certain prince, Tarasius, beheaded her with a sword. Probably not coming back from that. Although there was some, maybe we'll see this sometime, who actually pick their head up and walk to where they wanted to be buried. Thus, the saint gloriously ended her fruitful life. Her relics were later translated to Constantinople. She suffered honorably for Christ in the 2nd century. Another great saint, another great martyr. And I kind of stand in awe of them. And, you know, it's just like, wow, I want that faith. I want that abandonment to Christ, where no matter what they do, it doesn't matter. You know, you're not going to, I mean, we get PTSD by being yelled at. You know, we're weaker people. Maybe God isn't going to make us go through that. I don't know. But we're weaker people today than they were back then, for the most part. Always exceptions. Oh, now this is the quote of the day. Elder Joseph the Hesychast, great, you know, great saint, great ascetic. Elder Ephraim, who died a couple years ago, I think. He wrote a book called My Elder Joseph the Hesychast. It was before, I don't know if it was before or after Joseph was made a saint. But if you pick up that book and get it, you won't believe the things that he did to find God and the experiences that he had and how they lived and how God rewarded them. Anyhow, he says, all human things are vanity. Everything that does not exist after death. So everything that does not exist after death is vanity. This is something that I try to tell the students. You know, most people are living for money. Most people are spending 100% of their time and energy in this life seeking to obtain that which they're going to lose in the end, right? Money, things, social status, human, worldly experiences, whatever. Things they're going to lose in the end. You're not going to take your money with you. You're not going to be able to, finance God's kingdom or something. He doesn't need your things. He doesn't need your social status. He doesn't need your stocks and bonds. That's all going to be worthless in the next life. All these experiences that we had that we think we're going to remember forever are going to be meaningless then. We're going to hope we can forget them because they're all chock full of sin, basically, and corruption. That which exists after death, from my perspective, and it's just me, it's not saints, but makes sense. Your faith in Christ will translate into the next life. That which you do in obedience to him will translate into the next life. The virtues And the God likeness he's able to instill in you will translate to the next life. And maybe there's other things too, but these are the things that are going to translate it to the next life. All the things that the secular society says is so important, you have to have these experiences, you have to do these things, are going to be meaningless in the end. So, when you get to your deathbed, what's going to be important?
Mm-hmm.
Not your money, not your things, not your social status. That's all going to be meaningless. The only thing that's going to matter is, what did you do with the God-man Jesus? Did you get your life right with him or not? It's all that's going to matter. And, what you did for him, if you had time, virtues he's able to instill in you, not the things that we think are important. Everything does not exist after death, as Elder Joseph said. It's meaningless ultimately. They may have some function in this life. We have to have money. We have to have things. Social status, many of us are going to get. Not me, but many of us are going to get. And it's nothing wrong with any of that inherently. We make such a big deal out of it. We make that which his life is about. It's not about that. It's about what translates into eternity. And vast majority of what we think is going to translate into eternity, or what we think is important, will not translate into eternity, and so has little importance, some importance in this life, but none importance in the next life. So yes, we have to get those things. We have to do those things to a degree. We can't make them our life. Our life has to be the God-man Jesus and becoming godlike, so that we can get closer to him, and so that we can know him better.
Amen.
So that's it.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Well, thank you for walking us through all that. Thank you for taking us through your thoughts on abortion and Sylvester Stallone's life and all of that, and then especially the saint of the day and the quote of the day. Any final remarks before we sign off?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
I'm all talked out, believe it or not.
All right. Well, it does look like it's getting to be late in State College.
It is always late in State College, and even more so as the winter approaches.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Gary, Christ is risen.
He is risen.
Have a good night.
Yep, God bless.